Welcome to another Big Daddy D adventure. Today we're going to build another shop project as our adventure. We are going to build my Crossfire Pro shelf. I want to store some stuff down the bottom of it. So the general layout is, what I'm going to do is bolt a shelf between the legs. I was able to find something on their website. It was thanks to the fire share contribution of Jonathan Fletcher. He had an idea for some modular fish plate attachments. I'll have to show you those in a second. But essentially what it does is you will take the square tubing and bolt it across the long distance between the legs. And then we're going to weld a cross brace across between those two and then put a shelf in there. Essentially what you do is he's got these fish plates, and I'll show you those in just a second, that you weld the tube to one side and then you just have a blank plate on the other, and then it uses two bolts to bolt and tighten down on the leg. So anyway, I will tell you, this is a measure twice, cut once. I did some rough measurements early on, and I figured out my dimensions were 25 on the width between the legs and 58.5 on that. Well, today I made sure I measured the field measurements, which were, they were off. The front of it was 58.5 and the back was 58.25. So, I would have screwed that up. And then on the left to right, I was also off by about 1/4. So went ahead and made those adjustments in my cut list. So we'll go ahead and jump into looking at the steel and then go ahead and cut it. Hopefully you enjoy this project adventure. Here we're joining my Crossfire Pro. I think we're cutting out the last few of these brackets. These are those fish plate brackets with the bolt holes that I had talked about when I overviewed the drawing. So, well, hopefully you enjoy watching the rest of this process, cutting it out, and then I'll start processing these plates. Nice. Well, I guess I can't overstate it enough. Measure twice, cut once. I should have cut one of those brackets and identified that those holes weren't open enough to fit that 1/4 inch bolt. So normally when I plasma cut, I'll oversize those holes about 1/16 of an inch. That way it leaves me a little bit of space. Most of the time I use washers, so it's not an issue. In this case, it would not have been an issue. But in any case, well, now I have the luxury of drilling out all of these holes in these fish plates so I can get these 1/4 inch bolts to them. So here we go. I'm just finishing up the rest of these plates, and might have a side project or two along the way. Alright, side project number 1. When you're drilling something, quite often you get a dull drill bit. So I got this drill doctor. Does a pretty good job. Takes about a minute or two. Alright, looks like I got a good sharp edge back on this thing, so we'll try that again and see if it cuts any better. Side project number 1. All right, I guess the old adage, if you can't get it, grind it, kind of works out here. Well, after drilling all those holes, now I gotta deburr the back of those holes, and then went ahead and took the opportunity to clean up a little bit of that dross around the edges. I was able to clean most of it with a hammer and a chisel. I had a real wide chisel that I usually just snaps that stuff off. Welcome back. Well, I was able to look for some steel in my storage bin. I found enough steel. I got some 1-inch pipes. I'm gonna go ahead and make the frame of that shelf out of some 1-inch square tubing. Again, I went ahead and wrote down my measurements that I was going to cut on each of these square tubings. And then these are the fish plates. Essentially, I'll weld one to one end of the pipe, and then one of them will be a blind cap on the back end that I'll bolt around. These two will bolt around the legs. So, well, let's get cutting. Well, who doesn't love a good chop saw video? I will tell you, I'm really loving this Evolution chop saw I got here. They're not sponsored. I didn't get it from them. But, tell you what, having this in my shop and not having all the asbestos stuff flying around from those fiber blades that I used to use, this got to be a real nice addition to the shop. Of course, even now with a dull blade on these things, it's cutting pretty good. I don't know if you can see on the shelf behind it, I got a new blade. Hopefully I'll put that on there before my next project, and it'll won't spark as much, and it'll get through this metal a little quicker, but sure is cutting it pretty good now though. Well, before I get to tacking this big frame together, I want to kind of walk through some of the basic calcs that I did. What I did is I just said, well, you know, probably the one piece of this frame that's going to be under the most stress is those long sides. So what I did is I just ran some engineering analysis on that 1x1 16 gauge square tubing. I just considered it a simply supported at each end, and then a distributed load across the top. What I was able to do is back into, you know, would it hold 250 pounds? I figured, you know, between about 15 gallons of water, a plasma cutter, a pump or tank that I might want to put on here in the future, some miscellaneous, it's going to be about 250 pounds max. So what I did is I ran the numbers on this beam, assuming that 1-inch square tube in, and came out that it could hold a max distributed load, you know, in a perfect world, about 700 pounds. So, you know, for it to hold 250 pounds is what I'm most likely going to put on here. It should be pretty safe. So the other thing, I did also run some analysis on those bolts. The key on those bolts is that they can only be in tension or shear. If those bolts aren't tightened, or if you get them on an edge where they're going to be bending, they'll fail real quick. But under tension, these bolts are the 2/4 inch bolts per corner is more than enough. So I was pretty happy with this little fish plate mount on the bottom shelf, and I think it'll work out good for me. So let's get back to tacking this frame together and see how everything goes. Welcome back. All right, got everything laid out here. I went ahead and squared everything up, laid it out again. Since I have different dimensions on every one of these pieces, I had to be sure I labeled them, you know, left and right, and then how long they were to make sure they fit in place. Again, squared up the frame, and then I went ahead and marked these pieces so I could center this bracket on the end of that square tubing. And again, these will be the blind ones that are just bolted across that upright. So anyway, laid it out. When I get ready to weld, I'll just confirm that I got the diagonals correct so everything's squared up. And then, yeah, so we're good to go. Next thing I'll do is I'll tack everything together and then put it up on my bench and weld it all out. All right, let's get moving. Well, unfortunately for an operator error on my part, when I turned my GoPro back on to show me fully welding the whole frame out, it took a picture instead of recording. So got to jump ahead now to where I'm fitting it underneath the Crossfire Pro after I welded everything together. Sorry about that. Next time I'll check twice and film once, just like I'm supposed to measure twice and cut once. All right, I want to call an audible here. I made my square frame and I squared it up, but I got to thinking that my dimensions were off, right? 58 and a quarter. So what I'm realizing is where these legs come down at the bottom are not necessarily square. So before I welded these plates on, what I had to do, let's see if I can show it to you on this one. What I had to do is I had to line this frame up with where I wanted it. Of course, it was a little off from center. So what I had to do is I had to mark a new line where the edge of the square tubing is going to be. What the main thing is I need to have these two bolts be able to have a bolt that goes around it. So anyway, I just want to show you that, measure twice, cut once. Sometimes you got to field fit it. I guess I could have tweaked these legs around a bit, but I figured I'd do it this way. I guess my other alternative would be if I would have welded these plates to these bars and then bolted them up and then actually took the measurement of those two locations and then cut those, then I could have just, field fit everything. So anyway, I think it'll still work. I don't think it's an issue, but figured I'd show you that side project number 2 is having to make these adjustments. Well, after I got the whole frame welded together, I went ahead and decided to go ahead and cut a piece of plywood to fit on top as a shelf. Again, I do wood and steel in my shop, so I had the plywood in the shop, and that's the main thing. I will tell you, I like this saw setup I got here. I'll show it to you in just a second here. It's Craig's, one of those Craig's attachments for my circular saw, and works pretty good when I have to rip down a long edge. When I'm cross cutting, I just usually eyeball it, but for these longer cuts, what I'll do is I'll mount it in this little frame and then set it up for that edge guide. Of course, with this setup, I got to move my sawhorses around, cut a piece, move the sawhorse, cut a piece, move the sawhorse, where I can get it ripped. But hey, it still worked and everything fit just right. Welcome back. All right, I got the shelf finished, and then I went ahead and bolted it in. Here you can kind of see the fish mouth plates and then how it's bolted, and got the plate on the back side. It went in pretty easy. Again, I'll have to follow up a little bit later to say what would I change if I could change anything. I also added a center support because although I had expanded metal, I had some wood back in my shop, so I went ahead and ripped a couple pieces of wood that fit this bottom shelf. I may change that in the future, but anyway, I figured that extra middle brace would add some extra support here. So anyway, all I'm going to do now is just install these two boards, throw a couple screws in it, and then I'll be done, and I'll show you the hero shot. All right, I got it all buttoned up. We got my buckets that I use to catch the water down here. Got my lids. Went ahead and screwed on my deck, and then moved my plasma cutter up onto the deck so it's not sitting on the ground beside it. So next step for me is to put some casters on this thing so I can wheel it around. So coming soon, another video about that. Until next time, take care. Bye-bye. Well, I hope you enjoyed coming along with me on my project adventure building this shelf for my Crossfire Pro using those Fishplate mounts. That was a real big win for me. I really didn't want to drill into those legs, so I think that worked out pretty well. And if I was going to change anything, I would probably have either field fit those cross braces, and after I had bolted the long ones in, or would have just cut another set of fish mouth brackets, and instead of welding those cross pieces, I would have just bolted them in and then put the plate on top of it. But all in all, it worked out good. So again, if you like this video, give me a thumbs up, and if you'd like to come on more adventures with me in the future, please subscribe. Take care. Bye-bye. Till next time.